Hey, what's up? It's Sep from Unison, and welcome to a three-part video series where I'm going to show you start to finish how to make a professional quality tech house track. So let me show you what we're going to be making. Let me show you the final product here. Cool, so that's the first drop. It's a full track. We'll get to the other sections later. So that was the mastered version. What we're gonna work with right now is the mixed version. I'm gonna walk you through the mastering in a separate session. So let's start off with what you need to really make tech house sound like tech house. What's really important are the drums. You really wanna use high quality drums. You wanna get, high quality hats, kicks, claps. The kick is very important. The second most important thing in a tech house track is the bass. You really want it to sit well with the kick and have it drive the track. So let's take a look at the drums here. Here in the intro, all that's playing is drums. So let's play this. So the kick is actually 3 layers. Usually I only use 1 layer for a kick, but in this case I have this low kick here. And I didn't feel like the top end was good enough, so I cut it off there and I added 2 more layers here. And the final kick sounds like this. Very round, very full. So let's take a look at the clap next. So there's 2 layers for the claps. This is the first layer. So this gives more of that snap, and then we have this as more of a body to the clap. It also has that shaker thing at the end, which is, when you put it all together, it actually adds a lot of drive to the drum group. So the next thing, we have a shaker that hits every beat. And then we have this stick. So let's put the full drums together here. So this is just the tops. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention the hat, but you'll hear it right now. Add in the kick. So this will be the foundation for our track. This is the main drum groove that's going to be going on throughout the whole track. The second thing that we're going to look at is the bass here. So let's take a listen. Right now it's actually cut off on the low end because usually in the intro you don't want to give away too much. So you want to tease them a bit. You want to use the elements that are in the drop, but you don't want to give away everything. So you cut off the low end on the bass. So then when it comes in the drop, it has way more of an impact than if they've already heard the exact same thing before. So what I'm using for this bass is a Unison preset from the Unison Tech House collection for Serum, which is actually coming out in 3 days. So this is the starting point, and we're going to go through all the processing in the next video. So let's skip to the drop and see the bass in action with all the frequencies. And for the MIDI, I just played this on a keyboard and then quantized it. One tip I have about quantizing is if I play something on my MIDI keyboard or my keyboard, I never quantize it to 100% because it takes away from the effort I put in. If you do it 90% or 85%, it still lines it up to the level you need it, but it still keeps that a little bit of human feel. You played it live, you don't want to completely make it robotic by quantizing it exactly. So I quantized this around 90%, and these are the notes here. We're working in E minor. So it's nothing too complicated. There's so many options you can do for a tech house bass. You can have a lot of fun and experiment, but yeah, I really like this, so it stayed. And let's combine it with the drums here so you can see the foundation for the track. All right, so that's the foundation for our track. Let's take a listen from the end of the intro through the break into the drop, and then I'll go through all the elements that we're using here. So let's take a listen. All right, so let's go through what we're doing here. So inside the break and build section, I have a cutoff at 140 hertz. I have a auto filter cutting off under 140 hertz on everything. Now, you know, if you don't want to put this on your master channel, you can create a track, a mix bus. You can create a track and then route all your other tracks to it so that you're not putting processing on your mastering chain. But in my experience, it has no negative effects, so I just put it straight on the mastering chain. So this goes on throughout the entire build, so then when the drop hits, the impact is much harder, as I talked a little bit about before. So also in tech house, you want to have some kind of vocal chop or some kind of signature lead that's specific to that track. So in this case, I use this vocal sample from one of our artist series packs by Meadow. So here it is. So it's actually a longer file, but I picked this Own It sample here, and I made some kind of a, you know, a choppy rhythm that went well with the bass and the drums. And for the transition from the intro to the break, I use this swish effect. I use this a lot. Either this or I'll use a reverse crash. It helps just to smoothen that transition throughout sections. So it's kind of steady here, you know, introducing this groove, getting the, you know, feeling it out, setting the vibe, and then when we get to this section, there's this is also a really cool effect from the same pack. It's like a camera shutter sound, which is really cool, and it fit the vibe of this track really well. It's always cool to use unorthodox things in your tracks because, you know, it helps it stand out and it can be fun. So that was the first. This is the break technically, and then we're gonna get into the build right here. So a few new elements come in. So, you know, when the build starts, you want to bring some kind of riser, noise uplifters, and we're gonna talk about this later, but I'm actually gonna add reverb to the entire track throughout the build. It's gonna increase. Also, I'm gonna low cut throughout the whole build up, excuse me. So then when the drop hits, I'm going to remove all that and it's going to hit way harder. So we're going to talk about that in the next video when we're going through the mixing. So let's check out these sounds that come in here. So these effects are really low in level. I found that, you know, usually in other tracks I'll have them more prominent, but when I brought up the volume, it kind of ruined the feel of the track. So having it really quiet in the background, and I'm automating the volume here so that it starts out, basically you can't even hear it, and then throughout the build it comes in more. So yeah, I found for this particular track, having these risers really low sounded better, but it still had some kind of effect to create that tension in the build. And this noise uplifter here, this is at a decent level, and this just comes in the second half to, you know, finish off that build, really, you know, add that upwards. You usually need some kind of uplifter because it makes the drop hit way harder. So this just comes in near the end, and before the drop hits, I cut off everything, the drums, the bass, everything except the vocals. So, you know, it just says it one time and then boom, the drop hits. And that's a really cool, there's multiple ways you can make a drop hit harder. You know, you can either add like a short pause like this, or sometimes you can add a full 4-beat pause, and other times you can, you know, just filter the low frequencies and then come back without cutting anything out. So there's a lot of options you can do, but in this case, I really liked how I cut off everything except the vocals and then the drop hits. And we'll talk about this in the mixing stage as well, but throughout this build, the delay on the vocals is getting stronger and stronger. And then on the last vocal, I completely cut off the delay, so it's more dry. I'm gonna show you all that in the next video when we cover the mixing. So now that we've covered the first intro, break, build, let's go through the entire drop and see exactly what we're doing here. So immediately on the drop, what I usually like to do is have some kind of downlifter, either something like this where it's more in the background, or a more brighter one, or some kind of short burst. It helps with the initial impact of the drop, and it fills up space, because without it, let me play it for you with and without this, and you can see how weak and dry it sounds without this coming in. So that was with it, this is without. Yeah, it's literally night and day. In this track, like, it needs this for sure. Now, if I had a bass that wasn't as deep and, you know, filled up more space, you probably wouldn't need as intense of a downlifter as this, but in this case, it really is necessary. So this is the first section of the drop. Now, you want to have something interesting or different happen every 4 bars. So over here, you know, I just throw in that vocal sample for the first time. And then for the second time, you want to have something a bit more drastic. So what I actually do is, again, using that auto filter on the master channel, I cut off the low end on everything. And while we're at it, when you're doing this effect, it's very common in tech house, but something that makes it a lot better is adding resonance to the filter you're using, because it brings out the harmonics of everything. So it really brings out those harmonics. So then when it drops into the beat and the filter turns off, I just find that it creates more of a contrast. So over here, I'm automating the resonance to you know, a little bit higher on those specific sections. So into the second half of the drop, yep, we're cutting off the frequencies here, and then let's check it out here. So the second half of the drop, you want to add something extra. So in this case, we just added 2 things. The first thing is an extra drum loop. This is adding some brightness and a little bit more drive and filling out the drums a bit more. I didn't want to use it earlier on because it was sufficient enough with the drums we had, but in the second half of the drop, to switch it up and add, yeah, again, that brightness and fill up the drums, I add this in. So this is what it sounds like soloed. So a very simple shaker slash clap drum loop, and this is one thing we add. So let's see if you can hear it coming in. You can hear that shaker, those shakers back in the background. The second thing we add is, this is a laser. It's one of the presets in the Unison Tech House collection. By the way, all the bass, leads, effects, other than the audio ones here, are from our new Tech House collection. We literally finished it last week and I started messing around with it, and this is one of the tracks I made. So I thought I'd walk you through it so you could see exactly how it was made, and maybe some of the stuff I'm gonna walk through will help you with making Tech House at a professional level. So this is another thing that comes in, this laser sound. You could also add some kind of a lead, like a saw, or just something to create some kind of variation and set them up for the next section of the drop. So in this case, this laser worked pretty well. I could still experiment and try some leads that are pitch bended, but for now this is working. So let's continue. Something else I do is I switch up the vocal chops pattern. So the first half of the drop, it's only coming in at the end sections, and then the second half of the drop, you want to intensify things. So I bring it back to the pattern I had in the build. So it comes back in like that. So let's keep going. All right, so that's the second half of the drop. Now coming into the second break, a few things are happening. The first thing is, again, I'm cutting off the low end on that last section, and I'm bringing that swish effect to help with that transition like I did in the intro, and also have that camera effect again. We also had it over here. We're gonna use it again here. And also we'll talk about this more in the mixing section, but add a slap delay to help smoothen that transition to the vocals here. You usually want to add some kind of reverb automation to your transitions. It really helps smooth it out so it's not a sudden switch to a new section. So coming into the second break, we introduce a new lead. So this is a lead from the Tech House collection again, and it comes in and it really fits well with all the other elements. And we didn't have it before because you want to get used to the foundation of the track and then keep adding things throughout and then taking them out as you finish the track, usually, especially in Tech House. So let's take a listen to this lead that comes in the second break. So everything else about the second break and build is the same as the first one, except this new lead that comes in. So let's take a listen here. Sorry about that, my computer's lagging a bit. This screen recording software captures the audio exactly how it's coming out of the Ableton, so it's a bit CPU intensive, so bear with me on that. But this is exactly the same. Something else I'm doing with the lead here is I've started it off with a lot of reverb, and as it comes through the break and the build, I make it completely dry, and then when the drop hits, it's dry. So let's take a listen to how the second drop comes in here. So you can see it really adds some drive after, the kick hits, and then this note comes in on that offbeat, and then the clap hit. I thought it worked really well here. So You always want to make sure your lead complements the bass line and the drums. You don't want it too busy. Usually you want it, kind of a simple rhythm. And yeah, this worked really well. So let's continue here. So yeah, again, exact same structure as the first drop, except this lead is added. We again have that downlifter here to add that space, and it comes in again on the second half of the drop. Does the same thing in the first drop, but yeah, every time there's a new section, this really helped to add that impact and fill it out. So again, we have that laser in the second half of the drop, and the vocal chops are the same. And I don't want to play the vocal chops, the lead, and the bass at the same time, and the laser. So I save the vocal chops for the second half of this section, because if it played all at once, it would be too busy. So check it out. So that's the second drop. Coming into the outro, again, that camera effect and the swish to do the transition. Again, that delay automation on the vocal to smoothen that transition. And the outro is exactly the same as the intro, except backwards. And yeah, so let's take a quick listen here. And then to end the track, I cut off some of the drums and end it with the vocal with that delay automation. So that's how it ends. Let's see here. I'm sidechaining everything to this kick. We're gonna go through all that in the next video, where I'm gonna tell you and show you what processing I've used on all of these sounds, the EQ that I use, saturation, compression. We're gonna cover all that, all the processing on the bass. I'm gonna open up the Serum presets so you can see how they're made. And I'm gonna go through everything like that. For this video, I wanted to give you the brief overview, the arrangement, how it's structured. And as you can see here, there's around 18 to 20 layers, I think. You don't need that many layers for a tech house track. You just need good drums, a good kick, bass, a couple leads, a vocal sample if you can get your hands on one. It always helps. And some effects. You don't need to go too crazy. I see a lot of people having way too many layers because they're using bad quality sounds, and they keep trying to layer them on top of each other and processing them all together. But that's what I found, is if you start off with high quality sounds to begin with, you really have to do minimal processing, and if your project is a lot more organized and you keep it simple, as it should be with tech house and most other genres too. Some other genres you'll have a minimum of 30-40 layers, but for this, the simpler the better. The higher quality sounds you begin with, the better your results are going to be, the more headroom you're going to have for mastering, and the less mixing and less frustration you're going to have. So the next video, we're going to go through all the mixing, so stay tuned for that. That's it for now. If you have any questions, leave them below. I'll read and answer them myself. And yeah, cheers.